This podcast is sponsored by Safe House Rehab Thailand, the premier drug and alcohol rehab dedicated to enhancing the science of recovery. First, a plug for my sponsor, who has given me the opportunity to help the families and loved ones of alcoholics and addicts better understand the nature of the disease and what they can and shouldn't do about it, shouldn't try to do about it. We say in our podcast and blog that our primary goal is to help you make an informed decision at this critical stage of your life. Safe House Rehab Thailand represents the modern approach to recovery, founded on safety, which is why we absolutely outperform traditional rehabs when it comes to intake and detox, technology, and aftercare. To learn more about our modern, advanced approach to recovery, we invite you to visit safehouserehab.com or send your questions and comments to info@safehouserehab.com. Hi, I'm Bruno J., and this is Season 6 of Episode Number 1 of Busting Addiction and Its Myths. I want to do a little brag here. We were recently named in the upper tier of recovery podcasts by FeedSpot, a respected social media ratings firm, so we must be doing something right. As you may know, my purpose is to carry the message of hope and enlightenment primarily to the families of those who abuse drugs and alcohol, and secondarily to those addicts and alcoholics who are closing in on accepting help or giving recovery their very first sincere try. One of the very first things a recovering addict sees after he wakes up and looks around is the damage he has unwittingly caused not only to himself directly, but also to his family indirectly. Painful just the same. That's why Frank's story is so relevant. He is lucky enough not to be one of us. That is, although he is neither addict nor alcoholic, he has seen and experienced the consequences of addiction and alcoholism in his family and among his closest friends. Frank, thank you for joining me as a fellow Canadian on our podcast today. And let's start with your early years and run through your education and career and where you are today. And you can start sharing your stories at the beginning when you were growing up in Ontario, as I recall.
It's a pleasure to be here. I hope that my stories help understand what's going on with this problem with people with addictions. I'm in my late 60s, so I grew up in the 60s, and I had alcohol in my family all that time that I was growing up at home. The first instance I ever heard of the word alcoholic was one time my father was coming home from a Lions Club meeting. And the speaker of the day was someone talking about alcoholism. And he said to us, well, I guess I'm an alcoholic because I'm not going to stop drinking.
And this was your dad saying this?
My father saying this,
okay.
Yes. He never drank. He drank every day, but he didn't drink to excess. I personally wouldn't call him an alcoholic in the way that I've learned to see many other people that I would call alcoholics. Our life took a twist when I was 10 years old or so. My father had a very open affair with a lady that lived 2 doors down from us. And it took a while for my mother, who was really quite naive, but a lovely person, to get to know this. And when she did get to know it, she had to self-medicate to try and deal with it. And her drug of choice was beer. And she got into drinking beer every day, quite heavily, all the years that I remained at home. And my mother and father had a very rocky relationship after that. So it wasn't easy living at home. I might say that I was the youngest of 3 children. My older brothers were gone way before any of this really developed. And so I saw the effects of alcohol quite early in her.
How old were you when you first, when your dad spoke at the Lions Club thing?
Oh, 10.
Okay, all right.
Around that age. And that was about when all of this went on.
Okay.
a little bit later.
Was there chaos in the early years that you recall, before you were 10, like when you were little, like 4 and 5?
No,
Okay.
not that I would say.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
We had I thought, a very happy childhood.
Oh, okay.
We lived in a small town.
I think that's important.
I was free to run around.
Okay.
There was
and where were you? What town were you in?
Streetsville.
In Ontario.
In Ontario.
Okay.
Yes, which is now a suburb called Mississauga.
Okay.
And my grandparents lived there. We were a happy little family. I thought everything was fine. My father dilly-dallied around with the neighbor woman, and it really changed the whole aspect of our life.
So that upset your mother, and she turned to alcohol to soothe the pain.
I would assume that's why.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
I never really confronted her about it, but it was the elephant in the room, as it were.
Okay. Did y'all talk about any of that stuff at home?
No,
Okay.
never. No.
Very typical, Very typical.
I'm sure.
Okay.
Never talked about it.
Okay.
It was a knowing look of disgust.
Did he come home drunk?
My father?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
not always.
Not always.
Now, I have one story when he came home, when I was already experimenting with pot and other things. He came home and he'd been at the golf club, and he came home piss-eyed drunk.
Okay.
And he said he had to drive with one hand over an eye to keep himself on the road. And he said to me, maybe what you're doing is better than what I'm doing, the alcohol.
So that suggests that he knew about your pot smoking.
Oh, of course he did. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Did you smoke at home? Or?
No, but it was well known.
He knew.
He knew.
Okay.
And
And you were how old when you first started smoking pot?
14.
Okay.
Yeah, so
All right.
typical. It was
Yep.
and that was a result of moves. We lived in Streetsville till I was 10, and then we moved to Markham for 3 years, and then we moved to Ottawa. There was some changes in my relationships. I never had anybody that I knew for long periods of time. My life was in stages. I grew up in Streetsville till I was 10. We moved to Markham for a few years, and then we moved to Ottawa. So I never had any friends from my very early years that I knew my whole life. They're all gone. I had no one I could really go back to that was Davey, who was my neighbor. He disappeared when I moved. So I never had anyone that I could confide in.
Okay.
And all those years when the alcohol with my mother got worse, there was no one that I could really talk to.
Okay.
My family weren't interested in hearing anything about it.
Did your mother isolate, or was she social?
Oh, definitely isolated.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
definitely. There was times when she did things like went curling and played broom ball, but they usually ended up with an accident, a broken wrist or some problem. She tried to motivate herself, but ended up hurting herself.
So typical of families like that, the kids don't want to bring anybody home.
Definitely not.
Okay.
Definitely not.
Okay.
After I moved from Streetsville, I never had any of my friends come home.
Okay.
Never.
Okay.
No,
Right.
that was an ugly scene. So then I left the house then. So I'm 15 years old,
Okay.
and I move out of the house because I can't take it anymore.
Okay.
I don't want to see my mother drunk. I don't want to see the relationship that she has with my father. So I move out, and I move downtown Ottawa, and I take care of myself.
Wow.
And that involved the usual things when one is 15 years old and living in a house with 15 other people. We were drug dealers.
Yeah, that's how you made your money, so you could afford the rent, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We all...
Were you going to school or not?
I started to go to school after I moved out. I did maybe 3 months, and then I quit. It was enough. I realized that I could make so much money. At that age, why do I need to go to school when I can make X amount of money every month?
Did your mom or dad try to find you or reconcile with you or anything?
They always knew where I was.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't gone.
Okay.
I talked to my father.
Yeah. But they sound like they didn't resist you leaving.
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, they let me go.
Okay.
And I did go back for a short period of time. I went and worked with my father for a summer, as I had in previous summers when it was busy in his business. So there was a relationship there, but I never went home again. I never stayed home again after that. Then I, of course, started experimenting in product and basically did the gamut. I can say that I've tried everything at least once, sometimes for extended periods.
Examples for our audience.
Before I left the house, before I moved downtown, a friend of mine and I were into amphetamines. We used to inject amphetamines. Mm-hmm. And we did a run for 6 months or so. So I got very sick. I got a number of things. I have mononucleosis, hepatitis, and I had hepatitis as well. All three at once.
And you're how old at this point? 18?
No, God, no. 16. This is still 14, 15, 16.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm banging it away.
Okay.
And we had a great time, my friend and I, what we thought was a great time. We would go downtown, score some drugs, go watch a band, go to the after-hours clubs, way underage, go to Hull and drink beer, again, way
Hull
underage.
Hull is in Quebec, across the river.
Then alcohol was a little bit easier to get in Hull, and everyone turned a blind eye.
Okay.
So there was alcohol, there was amphetamines, there was marijuana. That was really the first run at it. I got sick, but I was still at home. I went to bed for what I learned afterwards was 6 weeks. I was in bed and pretty well out of it. Tried to go back to school, but I was left out too long and I failed the year. So now I'm behind in this. And I was always a proud student before when I was very young. Got very good grades. Into the hockey. I played lots of hockey. But once the drugs took over, then the hockey went to the side and the education went to the side.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Because the drugs were more important.
Okay.
And then I moved out and drugs became the focus.
Right. Became everything.
Yeah, because I made money on it and then we had partied on it. And so that went on for quite a few years.
Okay, so next chapter?
Next chapter. So now I'm in my early 20s, and I've been continuing this whole life of, I've been working small jobs to legitimize the cash that I was having. Again, partying. Some friends came into my life that were true addicts and introduced me to things like morphine and heroin, which I chipped at but never got serious with. Okay. But they were raging, and some of them were staying with me intermittently. They had access to where I lived, and they would come and go, and I was okay with it. But they were crazed.
So heroin and what else?
Morphine.
Oh, morphine. Oh, so serious opiates.
Yes, sure.
Okay.
And that went on for a few years. I had a few girlfriends, live-in girlfriends, and they shared the spoils. They would smoke all my dope, and I'd find them at home with a house full of people when I came back, which was all okay. It was the times. It was mid-70s, and it was okay. Everything was fine. Whatever happened. We were a pretty big group, 20, 30 people that would hang around together. I got further into the drug dealing, got deeper with some very bad people because that was the steps that happened. You start with people and they introduce you to other people, and some bad times happened. The guns pointed in my face, and that happened a few times.
So describe an incident like that. I mean, it's very interesting to people who haven't been exposed to the sort of underbelly.
Well, okay, I was buying marijuana. One of the first times I was buying marijuana, and this neighbor of mine, when we were living 15 in a house, he lived around the corner. He was part of the deals would go in and out. I'd sell things to him, he'd sell things to me. That was what happened. And then he said, I got this great connection. And a word to the unwise, never do a drug deal outside of a house. We were in a car. And of course, the guys in the front seat turned around and stuck the gun in my face and said, just give us the money, That's it. And of course, my friend is all a flush, oh, what's this? He doesn't know it. Of course, he was in on it. It was all just a setup for me to steal my money. I was considered to be a naive dealer at those days.
How much money?
$15,000.
Oh, okay. Serious money.
Serious money for the mid-'70s.
So you're 20 some odd years old and you're doing deals at $15,000 a crack or more.
Or more.
Okay.
Yeah. Buying quite a large amount.
What were you buying? Marijuana?
Marijuana and hashish. Hashish particularly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it wouldn't be just for me. I would be putting a deal together and getting some cash from other people and buying.
So you're kind of wholesaling at that point.
Middling, I would call it.
Okay.
Middling.
Okay.
And I would end up with product and not cash.
Okay.
I would buy whatever I could for all the money that I got. I'd buy that much drugs and then sell the drugs and live.
Okay, got it.
And then, of course, things escalated and got into the cocaine dealing. And the problem with cocaine is that if it's in the house, I want to do it.
Yeah, okay.
And you had said that I wasn't an addict, but I would consider myself to be a sporadic addict.
Okay.
If it's there, and I know it's there, I'm going to do it until it's gone. Okay. But I don't have to go out and get more.
Okay.
And so I would be...
it's really hard to label people because, the classic medical or the clinical definition of a drug abuser or an addict is someone who is consistently uses it at the price of everything else on a regular basis. But that's on a spectrum, right? And so some of us fall in the middle. Some of us don't do it at all, and people like me, and that my audience knows me, it's an all or nothing proposition. But it sounded to me like it was almost like a take it or leave it for you.
Yes, definitely when it was there, it was take it.
Okay.
And then
But you didn't Jones and go out and try to find it.
Not very often.
Because you had it anyway, right?
It was available if I wanted it. I didn't have to go and get it.
Okay.
It was always business first.
Okay, got it.
And part of the business was...
Good point.
Part of the business was socializing. So people would come to my house.
Right.
I'd sell them something.
Right.
We'd do something.
You'd hang around.
They'd hang around. They'd do all my drugs. They'd go off with their drugs and never do anything.
But they leave you with some money.
Yeah, they'd always leave me with some money.
Okay.
So now this...
All right.
So you're talking about my family. So all the time that this is going on, my middle brother, he had the effects of my parents on the side. He was married quite young, and he was married when he was 15, and he was 16 and his wife was 15. Wow. So they were very young. They lived with us for a while. But he became the alcoholic in the family after my parents passed. Okay. And he became worse. Now, he would be what I would call a real alcoholic. He had no consideration for family, but he did consider his job, and he would go to work. He became in a major company. He became the SAT specialist and rolled new companies into their big mother company. And everyone in the company knew him to be the guy.
So this is mergers and acquisitions?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. And even to the point when I was times at his house visiting him, one of his colleagues would call and ask about a problem, and he'd be able to say, so which page are you on your computer? Okay, go back 3 screens. You see that in the bottom corner? Hit that. Do this, do that, do that. He'd solve the problem. But he was drinking heavily after work. So he went through the first wife. They divorced. And he married another woman, a younger woman, who was very gregarious and very sexy and sort of fit his fantasy of what the wife should be. Well, he ended up hitting her, and that was the end of that marriage after 2 children and the boat and the retirement. I always looked up to him.
How long was he married to number 2? Had a couple of kids.
5 years.
Okay.
And a great life. Had the big yacht in downtown Toronto. Had the huge salary, but raged at the yacht club, raged. Heavy alcohol abuse. So
when you say raged, was he a violent person?
No, I mean he was on top of the game, and he was the big guy. He was the
right.
head of the party.
Okay.
He knew all the people. He knew all the stories.
He was a player.
Definitely. So his marriage broke up. Now we'll go fast forward since we're talking about him. So now I've done a few things. I've come to Thailand, met a woman, married her, went back to Canada, was living a very quiet life, had a child, doing my work out of the drug business, basically. And he's calling me up and crying on the phone about
What year was this roughly, do you think? Do you remember?
This part?
Yeah, the part where he's calling you and things have gone to hell.
This is mid-'80s.
Okay.
Mid-'80s, yeah.
And that's when you had, and we'll go back to your story in a minute, but that's when about the time that you moved to Thailand and got married?
I moved to Thailand, got married, went back to Canada, came back to Thailand, and then went back and settled down.
Okay.
So now it's 89.
Okay.
And so this is when he's calling me.
Okay.
And he's now living in a small room by himself, drinking himself into comas every day.
What happened to him then? What was that downward path from being, the man to...
The breakup of his marriage took him,
Okay.
Because of course, he knew our marriage, my parents' marriage, and he saw that fall apart. And now he's realizing that he's emulating my mother, and the whole thing's falling apart. And he's crying in his soup.
All right. So that's what we call sometimes the ripple effect.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
Okay.
So he would call me. I'd try and console him. Well, one time he can't cope anymore. So I have
lost his job and his position and his money.
It's all gone. Yeah, it's all gone.
It's all gone.
He's on a pension, but it's minimal.
Okay. So he became dysfunctional then, essentially.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
He's destroyed 2 marriages. His kids all hate him. So he calls me to rescue him because his kids won't go and help him anymore. He's fucked them up too badly.
Yeah.
So I drove from Ottawa to Toronto, got him out of the booze, took a big bag of pot. Sit down here, we're going to smoke pot. You need some stimulant, we'll smoke the pot. You're not going to drink. You can eat as much as you want. I fed him and fed him and fed him, trying to break him of this cycle. I knew that it was not going to happen, but at least I could give him hope.
Right.
And I was there for a week and I didn't go to work. And then I decided, well, come with us. Come and live with us, with my wife and my daughter.
In
Ottawa.
Oh, in Ottawa.
Yeah, so we drove back to my house and we brought him into the house.
Okay.
And he said that he wouldn't drink anymore. Well, that only lasted a very short time.
Sure.
And he would say, well, I'm going to just get a 6-pack, a 6-pack, and I'll have it every couple of days. Well, then he found out where the bars were, and he went to the bars and got the 6-pack, and now he's stumbling drunk again.
In a short period of time.
In a short period of time, yes. And even though we try to help him by giving him a good family atmosphere,
right,
good food, I was with him.
Try to normalize him.
Trying to normalize him. But it was gone from the alcohol.
Okay.
So I tried best I could. And then so finally it was like, no, you can't stay here anymore. You're just disrupting our family.
Was your daughter born yet at that point? Or
Yeah,
not?
she was living. She was probably 5 or 6 years old at that
Very
time.
serious situation.
Very serious,
yes.
yeah.
Okay.
And as I say, I always looked up to him, and I always tried to help him because he was my idol.
How much older was he than you?
He's 6 years older than I am.
Perfect. Okay.
And he was in the volunteer fire department, and his kids were the hockey guys, and he was,
Interesting. One hell of a guy. Just one hell of a guy.
Definitely.
All the way around.
All the way around.
All the way to the top.
Smart,
All the way to
grade
the
10
top.
education,
Yep.
and went to the top.
Boom. And then boom down.
Yeah.
How long did it take for him to go from the very top to the very bottom?
It depends. I think that the alcohol was always present,
Right.
and he was a part of his friends, and his friends, they all drank, and they all
Right.
drank to excess,
Right.
but it was like the party, and they didn't drink Monday morning, they didn't drink Tuesday night,
Right.
they just had their parties, and they went,
Right.
and that just rolled. Now, whether it is genetic, my mother's, we are weak characters, as we all have these issues. Anyway, I tried.
So you asked him to leave at that point.
Yeah. And we basically separated. We didn't know each other for years.
Where did he go?
We went back to the little apartment
Okay.
and tried to just get by,
Okay.
which he did.
Okay.
His kids still didn't have anything to do with him. And if we continue with his...
Is he alive today or not?
Yeah. If we continue with his story,
Okay.
I moved back to Thailand. I said to him, if you want, come over and I'll show you.
Okay.
And he had said, he swore up and down that he'd quit drinking. I've stopped drinking. I know. Okay, come. So him and I went to the beach, and we spent a couple of months actually in a small beach town.
So he came over to Thailand.
He came over to Thailand.
Okay.
And I was taking care of him.
Okay.
He was drinking, small amount. I was okay with him having a couple of beers. I just didn't want him to be the fall down drunk because it was...
You could tolerate him drinking some, but not to excess.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the thing that tipped the balance in that time was that I went out and spent a night elsewhere and went grocery shopping in the morning to come back. And grocery shopping, I thought, oh, he'll like this, buying things for my brother. So
now, are your wife and daughter in Thailand with you at this point?
they're not. No.
Okay, they're back in Canada.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I tried to get things that he'd like and have a good time with him, right?
Normal.
Yeah. So I arrived back at the place we were staying, and I opened the gates, and what do I see but a line of shit all the way in the floor going into the townhouse that we lived in.
Okay.
Dried shit. It had obviously been there for days,
or
a couple of days, because I was gone for a couple of days. And him just passed out.
What's your brother's name? Pseudonym, please.
John.
John. Okay.
So that was the end. I can't deal with this anymore. I've tried. And he's like, oh, I would have cleaned. Well, no. You can't do this and think that you're just going to explain it away. I'd had enough. So that was fundamentally the end of my relationship with him.
So he went back to...
He went back to Canada. He now is living with his second daughter. They're tolerating him. He can't walk. He's spent.
Is he in his late 60s now?
No, he's in his mid-70s now.
Oh, okay.
So I've seen the ravages of the alcohol too,
Okay.
not just the parties, not just the thing. I've seen it take a very vibrant human being who was a guy and make him into a slobbering, shitting imbecile.
Well, that is a story of the high and the low and the bottoming out, but what is your guess as to what he is doing now?
Substance, just drinking a little bit, you know.
Still drinking.
Oh, I would imagine.
Hasn't awakened and accepted
there will be
help.
no awakening for him. He will just drink until he dies.
Did you, and this is just an example of the resistance or denial, I suppose. Did you try to have a conversation with him about accepting help or checking himself in or getting medical help or whatever?
Sure. When I went down to rescue him, he called me crying on the phone. I went down and we were smoking dope, and I said, "Isn't there some place we can go? Isn't there some people that will support you here?"
Right.
But he said there wasn't. He didn't want to go to a facility. He couldn't afford a facility.
Did he deny that he had a problem?
No. Never. He knew he had a problem.
He knew he had a problem.
Sure.
He just didn't do anything.
And accepted it.
Okay. So it was one of those, and you see this often enough, it's like, I'm an alcoholic, I can't help it. Screw it. That's just the way it's going.
Feel sorry for me.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. But I'm not gonna surrender. I'm not gonna accept help.
I'm not going to help myself
Okay,
either.
okay.
No.
Was he depressed a lot?
I don't know that I'd say he was depressed. No.
Okay.
I think that he just accepted it and drank and smoked his cigarettes, did his crossword puzzles, and that was just another day.
That was his zone.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right.
Very, very intelligent guy. Too bad.
Okay. Next chapter. Wherever you want to go, man.
Well, in this time, maybe we can go. I'm going to go back in time again, back to when I was living in Ottawa with, and doing all these things. I met many people then, and one of them, I'll call him Ben. Ben was a go-getter. He had always had the old truck that he fixed up, or the Volvo that was the cutest, fastest. He was a carpenter. He was a general contractor. He knew his stuff. He was good at his stuff. But he chipped. Because he was part of our group, chipped
heroin?
No, chipped the cocaine. And he lived out of town. He lived in a small town outside of Ottawa. So he would commute to work.
Okay.
And he was part of my network as well. So he would be picking things up and delivering things on his way back home, which was 100 kilometers from.
Okay.
So, he'd come and see me and he'd laugh and he'd say, I just drove in from wherever he was, wherever that town was. He said, I stopped under every overpass and did a line. And thought it was wonderful, Then let's just keep going. Now Ben was a fairly smart, wonderful guy. Sincere. He started to drink a lot. Started to do more drugs. His work went down a little bit.
He's in his 20s at this point?
He's much older than me. He's probably 8 years older than me, so he's in his
30s?
Yeah, early 30s.
Okay.
He destroys a marriage. His wife is wonderful, but she just can't take the madness. The raging. He's raging the other way. He's doing too much drugs and too much alcohol. Coming onto job sites just whipped. You could tell that he'd been up all night and do another line. We'll do a line before we start laying this concrete.
I got it. So he's a contractor?
Yeah, good size.
Yeah,
and he's still managing to do his work, but it's going down.
Okay.
The guys that he's bringing in aren't the quality guys anymore because he's trying to save money for himself.
Okay. So the quality of his work is going down.
Yeah. And so it's bringing all of us down as well because we're trying to maintain him and do a good job for the customer. When I saw him hit the bottom, we had another friend, a mutual friend, who had one of his children get married.
Tell me what that bottom looks like for Ben. Okay, you'll get there.
So, as I said, a mutual friend, his family had a wedding, and there was leftover alcohol that went and got put in my friend's garage.
Okay.
And we were all part of this, as you can imagine. We're a group, and after the wedding, we're moving the alcohol, and it's gone there. Well, what happens is the booze is all gone. And Ben had gone and drunk all of that booze just because...
In a short period of time.
gone. There was a lot. There was a case of booze, and it was gone.
A case of
12
liquor.
bottles of assorted stuff.
Liquor.
Yeah, liquor. Yeah.
These are the 750s, right? Or
Yeah,
quarts almost.
Yeah, 750s, yeah.
Liter or close to.
So he's drank it all. That was the bottom. That's when we all went, you're stealing now. You're not just doing this. It's taken you to this new level of stealing.
Right.
You need help.
All bets are off.
He did go. He did go.
Where'd he go?
To the Royal Ottawa Hospital.
Okay.
And he dried out for a period.
Okay.
He
Did
got
they
out.
have a alcohol drug treatment facility there, or was it just a standard?
It's the Royal Ottawa Hospital.
So it's
Standard, I would imagine.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
A facility, but yeah.
Okay.
But a government's
Okay.
funded one.
Sure.
He got out. It didn't take long for him to creep back into that kind of his old behaviors. What saved him was a woman, an older woman who took him under her wing because she realized how much of a wonderful guy he was,
Okay.
and that the alcohol was destroying him.
So she really cared about him.
She really cared about him, and she helped him.
Okay.
And he was at the bottom. And I can say today, he's a multimillionaire.
Huh.
She, in the last 20 plus years, 25 years, I guess, they bought condos and apartment buildings. He got back into being the contractor. So now he's got all these buildings.
Drinking. Did he stop drinking and doing
He
drugs?
stopped drinking and
Okay.
doing drugs.
Okay.
And him and I could go away together in that period, go to the cottage, and we never even thought about drinking or doing drugs.
So what do you think did she do something for him, or did he see the light in her? What's your take?
My take is that she was, one, a very strong woman,
Okay.
high government
Okay.
employer.
All right. So she may have provided some structure for him.
She provided the structure. She gave him direction.
Okay.
She put up with no shit.
Okay. All or nothing deal, right?
All or nothing deal.
Okay.
And the only times that he ever fell off the wagon was when she was gone.
Okay. That's a good point, isn't it?
And
So structure in recovery could be vital.
I would think so, yeah.
Okay.
And that was the strength. Her strength brought him through.
Right.
So when she was gone, he called me crying, and I lost the cat. Oh,
okay.
And he drank half a bottle of whiskey, and
Right.
I'd go over, and I have to tell everybody this. My time with alcoholics it's your life. You want to sit down and drink a bottle of whiskey, and you're asking me to drink a bottle of whiskey with you, I'll sit down and drink a bottle of whiskey with you.
Right.
I have no qualms about that.
Right.
It's your life. I'll sit and we'll
It's
talk.
your decision.
And we'll talk about it. Are you sure this is a good idea? Sure. Let's go. So we finished the bottle of whiskey, and
Right.
he cried about his cat.
That's a funny story.
But you know what? The cat was under the bed.
Okay. That's even funnier now. So it sounds to me as if, from your perspective, you really care about people, but you know where the boundaries are for yourself, right? I mean, they are unlikely to draw you into their world because you still have boundaries for yourself, even though you might share the whiskey with them, right? I'm not putting words in your mouth, but
I knew my own strengths. How's that? I still do. I know my own strengths. And if someone was like that and wants to drink or wants to do drugs, I'll be right there if they want to do it.
right.
And I'll party along with you.
But you can take it or leave it in principle, right?
Yes, I can.
Okay, right.
In principle, yes.
That's a great story, Ben. Oh goodness! And his did they marry?
Oh yes, they married, and
Okay.
she had some kids from a previous marriage, and he's taken her grandchildren. It's a big happy family.
He has children too.
He has very funny. He has a child that phoned him up one day
That he didn't know about.
that he didn't know about from his wilder days. You're my dad, and they're very close now. And
I love this.
He's got children, grandchildren.
I love this.
And so
all of a sudden he's got 6 extra kids.
Knock, knock, knock. Guess what? I'm your son. I've got a son.
Oh, man. It's funny.
And those were the wild days that he, probably had, a short-term affair or just a one-night stand with someone, and they made a child.
Well, there's an example of the hidden ripple effect.
Definitely, yes. It comes back to knock on the door.
Knock on the door. Beautiful.
And so there's many more.
Okay,
How about there's many more people?
Okay, well, just keep talking. Tune in next week for the next episode of Busting Addiction and its Myths, where we now have our weekly episodes titled by topic for you to search and download at your leisure, all in the interest of busting some myths and bringing you the truth about the face of addiction and alcoholism today.